view and stop your video. Also, today we have a special Zoom class at 1:30. Arnold Berry will be presenting a class on energy companies and the global transition from fossil fuels.
George, you got
George, I
muted.
think I may have muted you.
Thank you. And Arnold had some comments. And so Sal suggested that he do a class on it, and he put that together. So that's at 1:30 today. Okay, Sal, it's all yours.
Okay, so we've looked at the context of how the civil rights movement has begun to emerge, and that the FBI has begun surveilling Martin Luther King, partially out of fear of it being infiltrated by communists, but also a fear that the civil rights movement will become a threat to America, to the American government. Now, it's important to keep in mind the landscape of the 1950s and the 1960s, much of which we are still dealing with today. So much of the issues that we're seeing a virulent racial political landscape taking place in the modern day. And for many people, we thought that perhaps the events of the 50s and 60s had laid that to rest. However, that is not the case. But going back to the 50s and 60s, there's a movie coming out, and I think it's out already, titled Till, which is about Emmett Till and the murder of Emmett Till. This was a horrific event. It was basically centered around an allegation that a young teenage Black youth was visiting a family in Alabama from, or maybe it was Mississippi, from Chicago, and that as he went into a store, a country store, he may have looked at or made some gesture or said something to a white woman, and that white woman who made the claim has since recanted in recent years. However, that was enough for what was a vigilante justice to go and get him, take him from his grandfather's home, murder him, mutilate the body, and try to sink the body in a river. However, the body surfaces, and it comes to the they want to dispose of the body, but his mother comes from Chicago and says, no, I want an open casket funeral. And the world got to see what was done to Emmett Till, and it had a very serious impact. We also have the Rosa Parks refusing to sit in the back of the bus. This begins the involvement of Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. And so this phenomenon is starting to take hold, and it is a fight against racial injustice, utilizing the techniques of nonviolent protest. Those techniques are designed to create media attention and have the whole world watching to disprove ideas that Black people were happy with the special arrangements, the way things were, where they were essentially remained under Jim Crow laws and in slavery. And so part of that involved sit-ins, I'm sorry, in first one in a drugstore in Baltimore, followed soon thereafter at Morgan State. There was a sit-in Durham, North Carolina, then in Greensboro, North Carolina. And so the sit-in was where Black people were going into segregated facilities and saying, we want to be served lunch or breakfast or whatever, and forcing the authorities to come and forcefully remove them, exposing that segregation was not okay with them. And then it escalates with college students, white college students, who and Black students, but it is from elite Ivy League schools who come up with an idea for registering Black people to vote, going past fighting against the Jim Crow laws that were prohibitive against Black people voting. And many people say that what we've had going on in the past 2 years and longer have been attempts to restore the Jim Crow laws to keep people from voting. And so the Freedom Riders were going to ride into the South, and they were going to attempt to get Black people registered. And they were met with fierce resistance. Some of the buses that they were riding on coming into Alabama and Mississippi were set afire with them on board. It was a brutal assault. The same time, we have the NAACP is continuing its efforts to fight for racial justice. And one very effective leader, Medgar Evers, was murdered in June of 1963, just 2 months before the March on Washington. And so the murder of Medgar Evers is followed soon thereafter by Martin Luther King's enormously inspiring speech at the Washington Monument. And it is followed by an almost immediate reaction, which is the bombing of a church in Birmingham in September, in which 4 young Black girls were killed. And soon thereafter, we're followed by the JFK assassination. So what we have is an extraordinarily turbulent time. And mind you, the events that are happening here, and as disruptive as they are, we look at January 6th as being somewhat unique. It's not unique. It's another continuation of these kinds of events, and it makes for a very fractious America. And so I want to take a look at some of those lunch counter encounters, and hold on, I have to first stop. And so let me get to some of the documentaries here. No, I got the wrong one. Sorry. Stop share. Let me come back in here to share.
There is still opposition to integration here, but immigration is being accomplished.
Nonviolent direct action was contagious. African-American students began crossing the color line at historically white colleges and universities.
Boy, what goes on here? What? Application. Get out. Well, something just locked up here. I can't figure out why. All right, let me try that with that. Well, fine. Then it wasn't. Okay. So let me try this again. All right. Sometimes things just don't cooperate, do they? I'm exasperated by this. All right. What are you doing? All right, well, I will try another route and we'll look at more of it, see if that one works. I can't get why this is doing this. Stop that share screen, come to here, share. All right, let's see if this will work.
I walked down here, and as I was approaching, I saw 4 young guys leaning up against a car in front of the courthouse. And I got about halfway up the front walkway, and I heard one guy say, "Hey, buddy, wait a minute." And I stopped, and he came around in front of me, and he said, "Where do you think you're going?" And I said, "To the meeting." And he said, "What's your name?" And I got really frightened inside. I must have been radiating fear, but I just was terrified. And the next thing I knew, there was a blur. And his punch helped me spin. And I went down on one knee, and as soon as I hit the ground, I was running. All sound stopped. And I could feel my heart pounding, and I could hear the sound of their breathing. And within about 5 seconds, I was halfway across the lawn, and I could hear their breathing falling back, and I knew I was safe. Hello.
Paul, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to meet you.
It's been 43 years, hasn't it?
It's been a while.
Long, hard time in between us, hasn't it?
Yes, yes it has.
Yeah. 43 years ago, hard to remember every little thing. But yes, I remember I popped you. Do remember that. I know you were much faster than me.
Thank God, eh?
Well, I don't know.
So if you had caught me, what would have happened?
I'd imagine you'd have been very sore for 2 or 3 days. In fact,
And so what you have is a freedom rider now coming back and meeting with Byron T. LeBeckwith's son, who attacked him that day and punched him. And so they're reflecting on what happened during that time.
I think when you came up the following day to really identify me, when the police brought you to my service station, I think you were still rubbing. I was going to hurt somebody.
Medgar Evers served overseas in the U.S. Army. In Mississippi, he fought for black rights, organizing voter registration drives, boycotting segregated white businesses, and investigating crimes against blacks. On June 11, 1963, he worked late, coming home after midnight. He couldn't see what was happening in the bushes across the road from his home. Medgar was buried in Arlington with full military honors. 3,000 people heard these words: "No soldier in this field has fought more courageously, more heroically than Medgar Evers." And later, President Kennedy received his family at the White House. When you heard that Medgar had been killed, how did you feel?
I'll be very truthful. I just laughed. I said, well, somebody's took care of the problem. Now maybe things will shut up and settle down.
What happened that night, and why did your dad go to prison?
Through the Klan, there were more than one person or a couple of people involved. Straws were drawn and the decision was made by those people.
That Medgar was to be killed, correct?
Yes, sir.
And was the straws drawn to decide who would be the shooter?
You know, that's the last gray area that I do not have the exact conviction in my heart, my mind of who. I'm actually telling you out of my mouth that there's only two still alive.
Have you talked to them?
Yes, sir.
You've asked them who pulled the trigger?
I've asked them to answer some questions for me that will give me the definite answer, because they will die with it just like my father did.
And will they give you the answer?
So far, they haven't.
What's the solution?
Solution is reconciliation and bringing just race together.
So why was Medgar killed?
Because he was getting his program working in voter registration.
And did it make a difference?
Oh, yes, sir. It made a difference. It got people more stirred up on both sides. Some things moved forward, but his movement and what he himself was spearheading did take a slowdown. And it became more of a politician game, and no disrespect, but using you young northern idiots, as I call it, to come on down and take the beating and do the dirty work.
You came down here, you Freedom Bride, you Snicks, and all those folks came down here with, frankly, with our Jewish names, all published. People say, oh, the goddamn Jews are down in Mississippi tearing the place apart. You go home. We begged you, don't come down here. Stay away. No, you didn't do it.
Paul, you were down here as a nigger lover, trying to get things done for them, and I didn't feel like you, as a white man, had any right to get yourself involved in it.
Had it not been for the white kids from the North coming down here and getting beaten and killed for helping us to try to get our freedom, this country, I believe, would have still been in the dark ages. And a lot of people looking at hear me say that. But the white people in this country couldn't stand to see television. The white girls and white boys being dragged and beaten, and Michael Swan and the government being killed to help us. Then the governments began to change and started enacting laws that protected everybody, and that included us. That was a great impact. Long as it was just black folks, they would kill us and go on about their business. But when it started killing white people, it made a difference. So thank y'all, you white folks who came down, including you.
I don't care what the rest of the world agrees with me or not, because I'm a Beckwith. I've got respect for Medgar. The respect comes because he was man enough to serve in the United States Armed Forces. I believe he was in the Army. He came home with a strong will and a desire to help his race and his people.
Your dad was convicted of killing him. Given your respect for Medgar,
Yes, sir.
is there a contradiction here?
No, my respect is for what the man did and believed in.
I wanted to work in the civil rights movement. I wanted to help with administration. It's a conspiracy of the law. As a young...
Why our territory? Now, why did you get into the movement, and what was your thinking why you wanted to become a freedom rider?
It was me as a young man sitting in Toronto, actually watching the evening news, that these three guys, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner, who they were, and that they disappeared. And as I watched the news each night, I was horrified. When their bodies were discovered, I felt bad. They were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan with the involvement and the conspiracy of the local police. And I wanted to do something. I wanted to work in the civil rights movement. I wanted to help with voter registration. How strong was the Klan? How many?
Oh my goodness, in the 60s, it was in the thousands. Now, you had police officers and also some with the Mississippi Highway Patrol were members of the Klan. The Klan was very dominant, and the imperial wizard of the Klan was Sam Bowers, and he controlled the Klan. So if he wanted someone murdered, all he had to do was order that person murdered. Like Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney.
Michael Schwerner had come from New York, had come down here to set up a freedom school in Meridian, which is close to where I grew up.
And Goodman was an individual, a young student from New York. And then James Cheney was a Mississippi black.
Andrew Goodman had only been in Mississippi a day when he went with Cheney and Schwerner to a black church near my hometown.
And Schwerner was the person that the Klan had marked for death.
And then they were followed by a mob of several cars, including, you know, Highway Patrol were involved, and the deputy sheriff, and that kind of thing. And then run down, basically, and then killed on the side of the road.
And when they worked to register blacks to vote, that's when they were killed.
When you found out that Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner had been killed, how did you feel? What was your response?
Just 3 more damn idiots that should have kept their nose out of Mississippi business and Mississippi politics and should have stayed at home. And they got what they deserved.
I was sick. Number one, they're Jewish. Number two, they had no business being killed. Number three, I know where they were killed. I know the people that killed them. And they're pigs, for the most part. Sure, hell, nobody that I know was happy about that. Good Lord.
And so what I think is important is that we deal with the events in the moment. You can look at the civil rights movement and the murder of Martin Luther King, and you can set a frame around that and analyze what's there. But I think there is a bigger picture, which is really the theme of, you know, my classes involving American history. And it's that when you go back and you look at humans and how we've existed for 350,000 years, and we come to that juncture where we can become introduced to the ideas of property and ownership and wealth and power, it changes everything about our species. And then that becomes a group, not, you know, the mass population, but a very select few, the less than 1%, who become obsessed with wealth and power. And there are no constraints. There is nothing that will hold them back. We try to, our species tries to rein it in through religions and moral codes of acts of behavior that are acceptable and unacceptable, to try to you know, come to a more human way of existence. But that fails. We develop different political entities and how they then try to rein in this immoral, inhuman behavior. But it goes on. And the idea of racialization, I have to rationalize and justify my greed, my torturing of other human beings so that I can get more wealth, more luxury. I then need excuses. I need something to rationalize and justify. And out of Africa, we get the idea that, oh, well, we're not really doing these horrible things to our people. We're doing it to the others. And the others became people who had lighter skin or darker skin than the emperors who were leading empires within Africa. So what, when you see that, what's going on here is simply another iteration of it. It is that there is this animosity towards Black people because they're not equal to us. And where did that idea come from? It came from 1,000 years before, but it became integrated and embraced, and it helped to protect those of wealth and power. And so what my point here is that when we get to the murder of Martin Luther King, to think that it is some lone nut who just comes up with the idea by himself is absurd. This is put together by people who are sophisticated and know how to structure an assassination, and they are going to fund their patsy to be able to globetrot for a while as they have someone that they can finger for it, and it's not them. Why do they have to get rid of Martin Luther King? Because he has become too powerful. Even Byron D. LeBeckwith's son is saying, why did we have to kill Medgar Evers? It's because he was being effective. He was being effective, and that's what had to happen.
With a multiplicity of Klan groups scattered throughout the South in the 1960s, one of the most bloodthirsty was the White Knights of Mississippi. The White Knights were led by Imperial Wizard Sam Bowers. Hardline Klansmen of today still revere Bowers.
Sam Bowers, 300 wanton acts of terrorism, bombs, bricks, and bullets, not bullshit. Bombs, bricks, and bullets. The greatest Klan leader that ever lived.
And so we will come to the Civil Rights Act next week, and you have to understand how important these events were, how monumental they were. That, mind you, when we talk about George Wallace, the governor of Mississippi, the governor of Louisiana, these are all Democrats. These were, maybe the Democratic Party was the representative of racial animosity. And when LBJ went against the Democratic Party, what happened? The Democratic Party then fractured. And the parties then rebranded. So this period of the mid-1960s, you see the transformation of both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. And it's all driven by issues related to race. It's important to understand the depth, the intensity of this racial animus, and that Martin Luther King most certainly was assassinated, but what we suggest is that they have one person who is there as, this is the bad guy, get him, case closed, you got him, you got your evidence, we don't need to take it any further than that, when in actuality there is an apparatus behind James Earl Ray that is really responsible for the murder, and it's questionable as to whether James Earl Ray ever really even fired a shot. So, you know, we're going to have to deal with that. But it is, and you can see in our contemporary political fights, again, the race issue is front and center. And this is Samuel Bowers, another person who's suspected of being in the center of the murder of King, in organizing it and orchestrating it. So, okay, with that, I'm going to close with something other than a poem today. I want to share with you what Malcolm X had to say. And this can also be put to lyrics and has been by others. So let me just share with you his nightmare speech. Brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you that I charge the white man. I charge the white man with being the greatest murderer on earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest kidnapper on earth. There is no place in this world that man can go and say he created peace and harmony. Everywhere he's gone, he's created havoc. Everywhere he's gone, he's created destruction. So I charge him. I charge him with being the greatest kidnapper on this earth. I charge him with being the greatest murderer on this earth. I charge him with being the greatest robber and enslaver on this earth. I charge the white man with being the greatest swine eater on this earth, the greatest drunkard on this earth. He can't deny the charges. You can't deny the charges. We're the living proof of those charges. You and I are the proof. You're not an American. You are the victim of America. You didn't have a choice coming over here. He didn't say, black man, black woman, come on over here and help me build America. He said, nigger, get down in the bottom of that boat, and I'm taking you over there to help me build America. Being born here doesn't make you an American. I'm not an American. You're not an American. You are one of the 22 million black people who are the victims of America. You and I were never seen, we've never seen any democracy. We ain't seen no democracy in the cotton fields of Georgia. That wasn't no democracy down there. We didn't see any democracy on the streets of Harlem and the streets of Brooklyn and the streets of Detroit and Chicago. That wasn't democracy down there. No, we've never seen democracy. All we've seen is hypocrisy. We don't see any American dream. We've experienced only the American nightmare. Okay, George.
Okay, we recommend you stay in speaker view and use the raise the hand function for comments or questions. Powerful stuff, Sal. God.
Nancy, please unmute. Nancy has a question. If I get you to unmute. Nancy?
Yeah,
I'm
You're good. You're good. You're good.
Okay. I noticed that all these Klans people were men. And there may have been a bunch of women in the background, and their response would probably be, if somebody asked them a question, if somebody said, what are you doing? Oh, I don't know, my husband, he's in it, blah, blah, my husband this, my husband that. And that would have probably been the cultural response back in, especially in the South, but back in those days before women started going to graduate school, law school, medical school, and everything else like everyone else. So I just wonder if there's been any research done as to the collaboration of female Klansmen and whether they really had anything to do with it or just dragged themselves out there and stood around maybe wearing a white cape or something, looking kind of frazzled.
Well, you know, when you look at the literature, there's a vast amount that talks about women who were a part of the apparatus of the Klan. Mind you, this is a very misogynistic group of people, just as it was racist. So women had a very defined place within that culture, and it was really subservient to the male. There's one of the videos I wanted to show, it shows white women who are in support. And what they do is they echo the notions that are expressed by the men, but they certainly take a subservient role. But there's good stuff out there to read about.
Well, I was thinking, if they don't like their subservient role and they're not too scared to speak out, that might have been a group that they could have tapped into in court trials to testify. My husband did this and that and the other, and we're divorced now, but this is what he did.
Yeah, well, there's one of the books that I reference in there is by Gary May. He's a professor at University of Delaware, and he talks about the FBI investigation of Schwerner and the others, is that some of the most important leads came from women, women who were involved with some of the police officers who then provided information that was significant in the arrest and convictions. Yeah.
Tim?
Yes, it's just my opinion that nothing much has changed in the South. They don't maybe wear the hoods anymore, but they're called now Christian nationalists and white supremacists and people against demographic change and all these other things, and the voter suppression laws and the anti mail-in ballot people and stuff like that. In my opinion, most of these people dropped out of kindergarten.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, when you look at, again, when you put it into the whole context of how did this culture come about? And, I like to go back to Bacon's Rebellion and the use of wedge issues that were very effective. And in the 1600s, Virginia passes laws that say, here's what you can do to your black slaves, here's what you can do to your white slaves. These things become very important in the development of the culture, where poor whites, again, going deep back, who were those poor whites? They were the people who were kicked out of England because of the Enclosure Acts. They were the dregs of the society. They were the people who got forced here. And so their ancestors go on and they live in a world where they have been insulted, they have been disrespected, they have been kicked out of their homeland, they've been dumped on the shores of America, and they feel low. And then along comes somebody who would be placed below them, so they can at least feel some sense of being superior to somebody else. And that was the Black people. And it really gave them a sense of, yeah, maybe my life is miserable, maybe I have nothing, but I'm at least a notch above them. And that became something they couldn't let go of. For 400 years, they couldn't let go of it. And it comes to a head in the 1960s, but it's not just about the events of the night. It's not just about killing Medgar Evers. It's not just about that. It's about the accumulation of stuff that has built up over hundreds of years. And I think we have to recognize that if we're ever going to really come to grips with it all, if it is at all possible to come to grips.
Right, and they overthrew the civil rights documentation and the voter rights and all of that. They overthrew all of that stuff. And you want to see America go down the tubes is have these people remain in power.
Look, the Supreme Court has been boldly moving us into 1860. So, that's where we are. What we thought were gains are now all being reversed. So
thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Ralph.
Sal, very much enjoyed that. I'm sorry I was late coming in, and you may have talked about this at the very beginning, but can you quickly review what happened as to the convictions of these killers and the others involved? Were they in fact all identified and convicted?
Not all, but it's like Byron D. LeBeckwith eventually gets convicted But what, and Dave, I don't know if you're familiar with the background on this, so correct me if I'm wrong, is that they don't get convicted on state charges for homicides.
Right.
You know, you have nullified juries, you have, you know, all that kind of stuff goes on. But they do get convicted on federal charges. So yeah, they spend some time in jail, but for all intents and purposes, they escaped true accountability because of what they had done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole nother book there for someone to write about all of the times during the civil rights movement. I guess it would have to be after the passage of the, well, it wouldn't have to be, but you know, obvious terrible people who do not get convicted by their states, never get convicted, but because of the existence of federal statutes that will convict them, then they wind up getting convicted.
Yeah, you know, Ralph, if we look at the black child who was killed in Cleveland, the prosecutor won't even bring it to a grand jury. I mean, yeah. And we're not talking about the Deep South, we're talking Cleveland. Yeah. So yeah. Look, you know, as I've said before, from a security analyst standpoint, the greatest risk in America, the greatest vulnerability in America is racial hate. It will kill. It is a cancer that will kill us. It may already be, we may already be at stage 5. I'm sorry to say, but I believe that may be the case.
Yeah. Well,
Diesel?
Yeah, thanks.
Gisela?
I just want to comment that the Ku Klux Klan was not only active in Mississippi and Alabama, but also here in Georgia. And in the 60s, my husband was a reporter for WSB TV, and there was a huge Klan meeting in Stone Mountain that the station decided to cover. And they sent my husband, Don, out to cover the meeting, the rally. And they made the very odd decision, very courageous decision to send with him his friend, who was a Black photographer. And so you can imagine what kind of reception this got. And they sent state troopers to protect them. But they did go and they did report on it. And I thought it was really courageous of the station to do that. That's all.
Oh, no, it's a good point. There's there is a field of study of journalism during the civil rights movement, and stories about reporters who really at great personal risk, photographers, again, great personal risk that documented much of what happened, and it's really fascinating. Yeah. The book that I keep recommending is the book by Gary May. It's on my bibliography that you have, because it goes deep into the FBI investigation, and there were FBI informers who were there present that wound up then providing the information that led to the prosecutions. Yeah.
Joy?
Actually, to follow up on what Ralph said, Sal, you gave me a great book on that, The Blinding of Isaac Woodard. I can't remember the subtitle, but basically what caused Truman to integrate the military. And I highly recommend it. It was very readable.
Yeah, and that's written by a federal court judge.
Right, I had met him.
Yeah, it's really it's a page turner, and it's sad. It's in the bibliography too. Yeah.
Good. And the other thing is, Europe is now starting to have the same type of racial problems that we are. And it's interesting that the Caucasians who conquered are now on the receiving end in both Europe and US.
Yeah, you know, I have to look at the phenomenon of racial hate, of, you know, anti-Semitism, all of those things are human created, are fabricated, all of them on lies, and they're used by the people of power to drive wedges between the masses and keep the masses fighting each other and not fighting them.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it is a strategy that is played out effectively time and time again. And
how do you overcome that, though? That's the problem. Nobody's ever overcome it.
Well, you know, again, I have answers to nothing, but my belief is that if we can get people to widen out the frame, look at the broader, that to understand that when people are narrowing the frame, they're manipulating you. That's what they don't want you to have the context. They don't want you to have the background, because if you do, you're going to see that what they're doing right now, to quote Tubby Tuberville, it's bullshit. You know, that's what it is. It is, and all of it is, how do I reframe it so that I can carve out this information, cherry pick this other piece of information, and tell a narrative that's different than the one that is the truth, but gets you to do what I want you to do. And
Florida and Georgia have done it. Florida and Georgia just did it.
Right. Sure. We're not trying to manipulate the voting system so we can introduce Jim Crow too. Well, that's not what we're doing, but that is what you're doing.
No, we just determine what you can read in school, what you can teach, what you must teach.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at this happening over a broad period of time, that this is not new. These are tried and true techniques that when they want to give you some other tale, that you should, you know, you go, no, you're lying. I mean, you know, come on. Critical race theory, please. Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, Sal, any closing comments or?
Well, next week we are, what are we doing next week? We're going to look at LBJ does break with the Democratic Party. And part of my theory of LBJ is that he really wanted to get civil rights legislation passed. And part of my theory is that he continued the fight against the communists in Vietnam as a means for holding off the right wing from stopping him from getting the civil rights passed. If he tried to go against the war and go for civil rights, he would have been crushed on both ends. So, and the problem is that he does get some advances. However, he has the war in Vietnam also taking place. And that does become a tool that eventually crushes not only LBJ, but becomes a mechanism for fighting back against civil rights progress. Okay.
All right, I've asked everyone to unmute so we can thank Sal for another.
Thanks, Sal.
Thank you, Sal.
You're
the best.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.